Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to Lincoln University. Welcome to B-Link Innovation. My name is Wim de Koning, and I'll be your host for today. Today, we're going to talk about the future of biosecurity for New Zealand's dairy sector. And I think with an infectious disease that hit us all with COVID-19, I think now I think everybody knows what the effect of an unwelcome organism in a population is. So I think biosecurity now should be closer to home to everybody. During this event, we will actually look into the strategies and the development that are actually shaping the biosecurity here in New Zealand. But before I will introduce our wonderful speaker panels, our speakers this morning in our panel, I will give you a brief introduction of B-Link Innovation. As I already said, B-Link Innovation is a full business unit of Lincoln University, and we basically do three things. We try to connect people, and that's why we're organizing these events, so that people are actually coming together, and hopefully they start to talk to each other, or they see their names and they connect on social media to each other, and hopefully then they will discover a shared passion and interest, and with that collaboration starts. And we're convinced that when that shared passion is there and when that collaboration actually starts, that the true innovation actually starts to take place. We are based at Lincoln University campus, and you are very welcome to visit us when you are in the neighborhood. A little bit of housekeeping. I hope you all, this is a virtual event, so I hope wherever you are, you have looked at where the emergency exits are where you are. Housekeeping for the webinar, it will be recorded. So this whole webinar will be recorded and will be emailed out to you. There is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. So if you wiggle your mouse and you actually see that coming up saying Q&A, and you can actually pose a question in there for the panel. And then when all three speakers have spoken, then we will actually start asking the questions to the panelists. Well, without any further ado, I would love to introduce the first speaker. He's a distinguished professor here at Lincoln University. And Philip is basically a professor in plant biosecurity here at Lincoln University, but he's also the director of, and I'm reading this up so that I don't make a mistake, the Center for One Biosecurity Research Analysis and Synthesis, COBRA. Philip looks at risk assessment, impact on ecosystems, and most important, effective management strategies. And he is very keen to look at an integrated and transdisciplinary approach when it comes to biosecurity for New Zealand. So without any further ado, I will give the floor to Phil. And yeah, Phil, thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. I will now share my screen. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me, Wim, to give this seminar. My talk really wants to focus on the kind of interdisciplinary aspects of biosecurity and why New Zealand really is in a great position to deliver this, but also is in great need of delivering what we've come to term One Biosecurity. Now, everybody has a general view of what biosecurity is. There are various terms out on the internet. But for New Zealand, we define biosecurity as the exclusion, eradication, or effective management of risks posed by pests and diseases to the economy, environment, and human health. And you can see that biosecurity isn't just about animal health, it's not about plant health, it's about the whole aspect of New Zealand, its economy, its environment, and its human health. And one of the aspects of One Biosecurity is the aim is to bring those different sectors together to better understand and better manage biosecurity risks across the whole risk spectrum. So biosecurity affects multiple sectors. In New Zealand, we've been unfortunate enough to have a number of incursions over the last few years. Myrtle rust, which has affected our natural environment. We have Mycoplasma bovis affecting animal health. We have problems with Chilean needlegrass, pea weevil in the Wairarapa. Every few years, we get a Queensland fruit fly outbreak in the north. And of course, for a long time, we've had problems with Didimo in our waterways. So no sector of New Zealand's economy or its environment escapes from the threat of biosecurity risks. And of course, many biosecurity risks are cross-sectorial. We've managed to keep the red imported fire ant out of New Zealand, but this species is one of many that can affect many different sectors. It threatens biodiversity by feeding on native species. It can damage crops. It has a major impact on human health through its impact on skin, etc., and also impacts livestock health. So we can see that simply focusing on the red imported fire ant from any one of those sectors won't be sufficient to manage the risk thoroughly. And also what we find is that the major drivers of biosecurity risks, particularly urbanization, climate change, and agricultural intensification, affect all sectors. So for example, urbanization, urban areas are hotspots for emerging diseases, they're entry points for pests, and the high urban natural interface means that species can spread into the natural environment very quickly. Climate change, in many cases, it may create an improved climate for pests, but it also means both our primary sector and also our natural ecosystems become less resilient. And extreme events can damage all sectors. And increasing agricultural intensification can accelerate pathogen spillover to humans, particularly from intensive livestock production. It facilitates pest spread through homogeneous landscapes and fragments native ecosystems that leads them to be more vulnerable to ingress by weeds. So we need to have that more holistic understanding of how the environment is changing and how it will affect all threats, not just one particular sector. However, when we look at the research environment of New Zealand, what we find is that it is actually quite fragmented. We tend to look at the threats in a very sectorial perspective, either towards the industries that we're working with or the taxa that we're studying. So we have weed busters, we have predator-free, we have National American Foul Brood Pest Management Plan. Everything is separated, and yet there are commonalities across all our biosecurity threats that we might be missing by working in this simple way. So at the moment, we see that in New Zealand, animal health, human health, environmental health, and plant health are often dealt with separately. But really what we need to do is to bring biosecurity to work much more at the center of these different areas. Just to give you an example, here is a simple schematic showing the link between animal health, environmental health, and human health. So we know that wildlife can be important hosts for pathogens and parasites that can be transmitted between livestock and invasive alien animals. I mean, we just need to think about TB in possums, for example, in the New Zealand case. But we also know that livestock can also be important transmitters of zoonotic invasive alien pathogens that can go to humans. And of course, invasive alien animals are also vectors of reservoirs of human diseases. So this is often the focus of One Health, where we look at the links between wildlife, animal health, and human health. But this is a very restricted view of biosecurity, because plant health has also a major role to play. Plant health, for example, mycotoxins in crops can cause major problems in animal health in terms of food contaminants and also to humans. And invasive alien plants reduce the quantity and quality and affordability of food. Similarly, invasive alien animals such as possums are important pests of crops and forestry. Weeds, on the other hand, are injurious to livestock, either through spines or things like giant buttercup, which are toxic and reduce the productivity of pastures. But also invasive alien plants can actually be important, create new environments that are very useful habitats for vectors of animal and human diseases. And pollen allergens from invasive alien plants in New Zealand are the major cause of asthma. And of course, feral crops are often alien plants, and alien plants are weeds of crops. So what One Biosecurity tries to suggest is that we can't simply look at one of these sectors independently. We have to see the whole system. And so for managing animal health, we need to know as much about plant health as we do about environmental health. Just focusing on one sector is likely to lead us to have miss important aspects. The other aspect is how joined up is the biosecurity continuum. The continuum generally looks at how a species that might be native, whether it's a pathogen or a pest or a weed in its native range, is introduced into New Zealand, it establishes, and it begins to spread. And here we have in New Zealand pre-border mitigation factors such as import risk analysis, pest risk analysis, offshore treatment. We have invested greatly at the border through pathway risk analysis and clearance standards. We have incursion responses, pest and disease hotlines, and we have pest management as well. We also have a major aspect internationally in terms of market access and international agreements. Now, this is the whole biosecurity continuum. But the problem is that in many sectors, we just look at one element of that biosecurity continuum. We're either pre-border focused, border, post-border, or pest management, or international focused. And that's a major challenge because there are aspects that need to be looked across the whole continuum, not piecemeal across it. So let's give you an example of New Zealand. Here we look at the research organizations and their relative interests in offshore risk assessment, border inspection, incursion response, and species management across the different sectors. And we can see that actually there's not a lot of overlap. Plant and food research, understandably, very much about plant health, does look across the whole continuum. But other organizations are much more focused on certain aspects, particularly land care research, Manaki Whenua, which is a very strong focus post-border. And while there are initiatives like B3 and also the National Science Challenges, they again are only touching upon certain aspects. B3 is almost exclusively about border issues. So really what we need is an aspect of biosecurity that encompasses that all, particularly from a research perspective. Now, where's One Biosecurity going? Well, one aspect that is quite comforting is that in the forthcoming biosecurity system overview by MPI, One Biosecurity is being increasingly seen as the way forward, in that we need to have a much more interconnected system in New Zealand. And hopefully this will be one of the outcomes of this major refresh. But similarly, if we look at ag research, they're developing a framework for future in terms of investing in animal biosecurity research, and One Biosecurity is becoming increasingly something that they're tying into their own research. So there is scope to actually leverage this concept of One Biosecurity, both at a policy level, but also at a research level. And part of this is the background towards why we have a center of excellence called COBRAS, the Center of Excellence for One Biosecurity Research, Analysis and Synthesis. And what we're trying to do is to drive this concept of One Biosecurity in New Zealand, to enable collaborations between the brightest minds, to increase interdisciplinary research grounded in big picture thinking, partnering with industry and different organizations to put science in action, and also to transform the scientific culture to be more collaborative. And so what we're hoping is that COBRAS, funded by Lincoln University, will implement an accelerated approach to scientific discovery around the synthesis and data access and collaboration. And one of the ways we've been doing this is by interdisciplinary workshops. Here we've brought together a whole host of different expertise from social scientists, epidemiologists, modelers, molecular geneticists, marine biologists, to come and discuss some of the fundamental issues underpinning biosecurity. And what we came up with were 4 major areas where there are opportunities for working across different sectors. This is in new surveillance technologies, new molecular and genomic tools, incorporating human values and well-being into our biosecurity responses, and sophisticated modeling. And so here we can see links between those. We can see the development of autonomous passive ENA sensors that will help us monitor the risk of a pathogen spreading across the environment. We can develop new tools for proof of absence data using molecular tools. We can develop agent-based models of pest movement. But also the social aspects are very important. We tend to forget that we need to, when we're doing surveillance, the personal data governance is important. When we're doing molecular work, the importance of genetic data sovereignty is also incredibly important. And when we're trying to model responses, we need to understand the socio-environmental dynamics that lead to either responses being successful or not. And Mycoplasma burgdorferi was a classic case where early on, perhaps, the feelings and the emotions of the farmers being involved were probably underestimated in terms of the likely success of the response. And we can also see these kinds of tools being worked across the whole invasion continuum, looking at offshore risks using phylodynamic tools, for example, or using social science to establish trusted relationships with exporters, network models to manage shipping traffic, and tracking of shipping containers and contents. All these tools can be used across the whole continuum, even down to pest management, where we might be using DNA analysis to identify emerging pesticide resistance, for example. So to summarize, biosecurity is essential in a world that's exposed to multiple threats that impact human, animal, plant, and environmental health. Yet currently policy is still strongly sector specific. The concept of One Biosecurity attempts to bridge these sectors to allow greater foresight in the management of invasive species that impact these different sectors. And many invasive species impact multiple sectors, but their overall threat to society and the economy are insufficiently well captured by current risk assessment tools, resulting in unforeseen outcomes. And the major future societal challenges such as urbanization, climate change, agricultural intensification, and increased human mobility all require the more holistic understanding provided by One Biosecurity. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I look forward to the question and answer session at the end.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was a good start, and I'm convinced that the second speaker will definitely share a lot of knowledge with us as well. Grant Matthew from the Ministry of Primary Industries. Grant is got a veterinary degree. Veterinary science degree, Massey University. He moved around the world, was in the United Kingdom when the foot and mouth disease broke out. He has a very strong interest in ruminants and dairy, and started to work for the Ministry of Primary Industries in 2019, looking at the M. bovis. At the moment, he is the principal advisor to the Chief Veterinary Officer, and he is looking at our preparedness for more potential biosecurity risks. Grant, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, good morning. Thank you, Vim. I'll just share my screen. Okay, good morning. Yes, I'm Grant Matthews. MPI, Biosecurity New Zealand does have a Chief Biosecurity Officer, Stu Hutchings. He's actually just retiring, and the new Biosecurity Officer, Pete Thompson, is just starting. So in between those people finishing and starting, you've got me. So welcome, good morning. So yes, delivering biosecurity, protecting our primary sector economy, and natural diversity, biodiversity, and public health. I guess in doing that, I'm not sharing. There we go. I guess there's some rules and behind the strategy that's required for that, and it needs to align with the following things. It needs to be obviously inclusive and intergenerational. It needs to be enduring through some political cycles. As we know, governments are on a 3-year cycle. We're a ministry, we're working for the government, but what we do and set up and is in place needs to extend beyond that, looking into the future and coming from the past. Maori are essential to our biosecurity system and recognised as kaitaki. The system needs to be identifiable and meaningful for everyone that's involved. And as Phil touched on, it's not just things in isolation, it's the whole system, whether it's plant-focused, animal-focused, or human. And I guess the bits that I've highlighted there is, there needs to be some clear outcomes in terms of these strategies and a pathway to actually having these things implemented and functional. And obviously, importantly too, if you're doing something, you need to be able to measure it to see its effectiveness and gauge its effectiveness. Things need to be sustainable in terms of the practices of how we do these things, and as we're under a few challenges in terms of climate change and lots of things trying to get over the border, as I'll touch on, but we need to be agile and flexible enough to adapt to these challenges. And I guess as also has been touched on, COVID-19 was an example that was I guess fresh, I guess is one of a better word, in all of our minds. And there needs to be clear roles, I guess, for leading and governing the system and delivering the strategy. So this screen, there's a lot on the screen in terms of biosecurity, but we'll break it down into sort of chunk-sized pieces. So in terms of a biosecurity strategy, why is it important? Well, New Zealand, we have a large number of unique flora and fauna. that's important to us and our culture, our livelihoods, and our environments. And as Phil did touch on, as our health as well. So it's a part of that big picture. So that's why it's important. And so the strategy needs to have a biosecurity system that's strengthened, more strategic, and led, and it's able to cope with these emerging threats. It is challenging, and it's a changing environment, but we need to continue to evolve the system to ensure our biosecurity remains strong as new risks and new pathways eventuate. The problem is that we need to protect New Zealand from pests and diseases is a continual challenge. There's literally thousands of things across the border trying to get in, and so we need to be able to eliminate those sort of risks. Our biosecurity system, I guess, has served us well. I guess we had a biosecurity system when we didn't know we had a biosecurity system, when it took a long time for ships to get here, when Europeans first came to the country, and that was sort of I guess, natural selection in terms of cutting out some things getting into the country. But the threats we face are actually growing in scale and complexity. Risk pathways are changing, climate change, and then there's also the pressure from established pests with monocultures and so forth. And more than ever before, we're facing these risks on multiple fronts, multiple risks, and all at the same time. So I guess our vision is that the biosecurity system supports Aotearoa New Zealand to thrive. I guess that's crucial. But the mission is that we all benefit from a resilient biosecurity system that protects our way of life and natural taonga and our livelihoods in ways that are inclusive, efficient, and sustainable. So how do we do this? So there's been 6 PO that have been identified, so like pillars identified to inform this. And these came from discussions with an external think tank called Biosecurity Strategy Working Group. There's been internal MPI staff interviews that have been done over the last few years. Strategic documents have been reviewed, highlighting both gaps and opportunities for the biosecurity system, forum feedback, and workshopping within Biosecurity New Zealand. So if you look at these PO, the first one, I guess, is the katoto. This is us. It's all of us are involved. All of us are important. It's industry, business, iwi, science, research, the general public, MPI, and other government agencies. We're all involved in this together, and it takes all of us to protect, I guess, what we've got, and make sure that continues moving forward. There needs to be some capability and capacity. We need to have the right people with the skill sets required across different levels and different organisations within the country in terms of this. I guess it's been a bit of a challenge, and again, COVID times with people, the borders being closed and people not coming in or people leaving. But it's crucial that we have the infrastructure to provide these layers to have the systems connected. There needs to be a strong Aotearoa partnership. The biosecurity system needs to reflect the Maori Crown promise of partnership. And as Kaitiaki, tangata whenua have been practicing biosecurity for centuries and protecting native taonga through the Maori knowledge view. We need to have some sustainable investment. There needs to be investment, but it needs to be obviously sustainable to look at long-term biosecurity funding. We can't just go through feast and famine of having investment in some things and then nothing for a period of time. It needs to be over a continuum. And as has been touched on, we get these risks popping up that we don't necessarily expect it. And if you use COVID as an example, that was a classic example of where things needed to be sorted out very quickly, understood, and measures put in place. There was the system integration and coordination that I think Phil had a slide on, and calling that one biosecurity. And I guess, and also there's the future focused innovation, which is, I guess, what we're talking about today, where research, science, innovation, technology play a crucial foundational role in our biosecurity system currently, and what we need moving forward. So we are future ready and able to cope with the impending risks that will keep coming across the border. So in terms of outcomes, you've touched on some of these. I mean, we need the system to be agile and adaptable. and using the technology. We need to safeguard Maori cultural values and reflect the Te Ture o Waitangi partnership. We need the people, and we need a system that's going to protect our Indigenous and valued introduced species. We need to protect our biodiversity, the ecosystems, and our landscapes. And as we know, the impact of harmful pests and diseases to New Zealand is reduced significantly as the outcome. But we also need to function as a country. We can't just have a wall when it needs to be a measured response in terms of what comes across the border. We need to protect our livelihoods, primary production. We've obviously got industry, tourism, and our and as also Phil mentioned, the human health and well-being, and our social and cultural. So this is similar to what Phil showed before in terms of a biosecurity system. So it's like a layer of nets as the different stages of risk. So moving from left to right, there's the offshore, the pre-border, then we move across to the border, and then post-border there's the other different functions. So offshore, it's those things around capturing risk, and as I guess COVID has shown us, it's easier to keep things, or better to keep things offshore than not. And so that's where things such as input health standards regarding what you can bring into the country are really important to help mitigate something actually getting here. It's easy to keep the risk away. So for example, we import palm kernel to feed the dairy cows. There's a number of import health standards regarding that when Indonesia got foot and mouth last year, we imported a lot of palm kernel from Indonesia. The import health standards, we had been assessing them virtually while the borders were shut, but two people went across with the borders being open to actually physically inspect the facilities to ensure that there was the compliance. So the fact that when these products are coming across our border is that the risk has been mitigated and kept away. Then obviously the border, everyone's familiar with, if you're actually traveling again, and then and post-border in terms of, for us, in terms of MPI, we have surveillance and incursion investigators, and then readiness and response functions within MPI to respond to any discovered incursions. So as I say, it is a net, not a wall. I guess for a wall, it was what we had in COVID times, which made some things easier, that made some things more difficult. But yeah, we do have to allow tourism and commercial things to still happen. So that's all about risk management. Okay, right. So in terms of future risks and opportunities, yes, we have the biosecurity. Screen just disappeared. It's oops, sorry, back one. There is changing land use and climate change, as I touched on. I mean, things are getting warmer, although it wouldn't seem so at the moment, but things are getting warmer, and pests that did have a certain range are actually now extending that range to extend further south in terms of temperature for New Zealand. And there's also increasing pressure from established pests and diseases across the country as well. New Zealand is reconnecting with the world, which is a good thing, but there is shifting trade and travel patterns as a result, and this obviously relates to different challenging biosecurity risk pathways. So innovation and technology is an important part for moving forward. I mean, technology is changing. Artificial intelligence isn't just writing our essays, it is doing a lot of good things for us as well, as I'll touch on shortly. Genetic engineering is something that I think New Zealand needs to explore further. It's not all necessarily bad, but it's all about having some things that are, some discussions to be had regarding that, and that can actually lead to new biosecurity options. So I guess this is essentially what does good look like, and then there's some objectives here in terms of having our research prioritized, developing and strengthening our biosecurity research partnerships and collaboration, identifying and integrating Tauranga Maori innovative tools and approaches to our biosecurity system, and in creating effective pathways for all this to maximize uptake and value from this research and innovation. If you look at some of the things that are actually happening, in terms of the innovation space, I mean, some of this is dairy focused specifically. Some of this is I guess allied to dairy, where dairy, there's lots of things that touch on dairy. It's not just the cows in the paddock. I mean, it's what they eat, whether it's at pasture, at foot, or crops or otherwise. The fancy looking machine on the left there is actually at our new biocontainment facility at the Animal Health Lab in Wallaceville. It's a diagnostic robot that's looking at, or looks at blood samples, looking for antibodies, and it's a higher throughput robot, so it can actually look for antibodies on 7,000 samples a day. So if we're looking to be doing some surveillance for something like foot and mouth or classical swine fever, then there's 7,000 samples that can be put through that machine a day. That will be obviously accurate, it's quick, and it doesn't need people to be there doing it. And I mean, those samples aren't necessarily contagious to humans or zoonoses, but if there was something that was potentially infectious to humans, then that, again, humans have taken out of the equation, and yep, 7,000 samples get put through a day. The equally exciting looking black boxes in the middle there, that's actually at the Auckland Mail Centre, the old Auckland Mail Centre. We're getting a new mail centre for New Zealand, and this is where MPI, Customs and New Zealand Post deal with all the parcels coming across the border. This machine here is the RTT 110. Yes, I know it might look like the RTT 150, but it's actually the RTT 110, which basically it's a 3D scanner. So it involves the mail coming through and looking at items of risks in a 3D view. It's also got a learning capability, so it actually learns what it can be looking for. So things such as, from a dairy point of view, for seeds, for food products, and there's people involved with this as well, but it's a as opposed to just a two-dimensional view of something, then it gives you the full 3D view, and that's going to be incorporated into the new Auckland Mail Centre that's being built. So that's going to be pretty revolutionary for helping stop stuff at that, I guess, that second net, which is the border. And on the right there, there's a New Zealand pest register that's online, so public can actually report pests online if they spot them. Our import health standards are going to be all available online. They can be searchable. So again, it's a way of actually being able to have I guess the people can understand what needs to be met to bring stuff into the country, can be found a lot more easily and readily as part of a strategy for incorporating one and all. In terms of technology, this is a piece of paper that gets stuck under a beehive. So we have varroa mite that's in the country. Varroa, if you don't know, feed on the fat contents of a bee, and eventually over time will kill the whole hive. And there are some mitigation effects that you can do in terms of beehives, and that's, say, applying a miticide, but you need to know that the varroa mites are there. You don't want to do it too early, you don't want to do it too late. So one way of assessing the health of a hive in terms of varroa is actually looking for the varroa that have fallen off and they're collected. So this is a piece of paper that's stuck under a hive there. Not all the dots are varroa. There's, I guess, bees that produce bits of dirt or otherwise that fall off a bee. But one way of assessing it is through counting it. So you can see a $2 coin there. And if you were trying to do it manually, then it would be quite a long, lengthy, laborious sort of process, where AI now has been used to scan that. It will do it in like 2 seconds. And on that tray there's actually 1,485 varroa mites on there. So in terms of being able to assess the health of a hive a lot quicker, then technologies are able to be used to get these answers a lot quicker, get a more accurate answer, and therefore manage the hives a lot better. And hives, obviously, and bees are important to all sectors of the community. Also, something else, I guess, insect related, is that the Queensland fruit fly is something that we spend a lot of time looking for. There's import health standards and everything in place to reduce the potential for any incursions, but we also do need to be actually looking, because that's something we don't want to have established in New Zealand. And there's normally, over the summer, especially in Auckland, a lot of traps that are set, that are manually looked at by people tripsing around. So this high-tech looking trap there on the left is one of actually 60 that was used over the summer, just trialed. The insect flies in there. There's sensors in there evaluate the behavior of the insect within the trap. And there's an algorithm in there that when it detects the movement patterns of a Queensland fruit fly, it will send up an alert into the cloud, and then someone can actually go and check it in real time almost to find the Queensland fruit fly. So in terms of being able to assess things post border sooner rather than later, and before things get established, this is going to be a great help in terms of helping for that. And that is me. Thank you. I also look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Grant, for that comprehensive overview. Leads me to introduce our last speaker, Liz Shackleton from Darien Z. She is leading the Darien Z's biosecurity team. She is a large animal veterinarian, and she is taking up various leadership roles to actually look at biosecurity, animal health, and the regulatory sectors. This floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Wim, kia ora tātou. I'll just share my screen as well. Hopefully everyone can see that. You can see that, Wim?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Fabulous. So kia ora tātou. It is a pleasure to be here today to chat through probably elements of the pointy end of the biosecurity system from a dairy farming community perspective, and look forward to the Q&A session also. So as part of the discussion today, I was asked to cover off 3 questions. One was sharing our farming community experience around biosecurity breaches, and particularly Mycoplasma bovis. What work are you doing to ensure that New Zealand stays among the best in the world for biosecurity? And then also looking forward into the future, how do we see New Zealand's biosecurity system moving forward? So I'll aim to do a bit of a whip through across those 3 questions, and definitely happy to answer questions afterwards. So I'll start with really what have we learned, and really this is from the lens of a dairy farmer. The image on the left is my own family farm back home in Ireland. At the time Grant was in the UK in 2001 with foot and mouth, I was on the family farm watching the Irish outbreak, geographically lucky as we were, unfolding less than 100k from the family farm. And definitely 20 years on, those feelings are still really acute from that time. The dread, the uncertainty, we would lose everything, our girls, everything in terms of a family. And ironically, when we then came to Mycoplasma bovis in New Zealand, these images on the right are from some workshops we did last year, which Grant actually participated in as well, around working alongside the Ashburton farming community under a controlled area notice at the time, the busiest time of year, calving, to look at community initiatives to really identify pain points for them in the biosecurity system, and alongside them co-developing some community initiatives around safer trading of stock and how they might address those pain points. And really, these are their words that are on this slide. When asked the question, why did you come at the busiest time of year when we've had so many other people say just too busy? And these were their words, and ironically, very similar in terms of themes when you look at a farming community and you put them under the pump of any biosecurity incursion. So really what Phil beautifully outlined at the start, do not underestimate the social impacts of any incursion. The success of any incursion will depend on the ability to gauge and work alongside a community, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. So a really compelling why to get out of bed in the morning for the team. And I'd also like to share this slide because this is the reality right now and ongoing every time we face a biosecurity incursion or to chat to farmers about biosecurity. At the moment, it is financially really challenging out there. It's been damn wet, cold, farmers are under the pump at the moment. So this is front of mind for us as a team. And the one thing I would want to share with this audience is when you're going to integrate to either a farmer, a grower, the public, a population, be aware that this is the reality you're facing every time you're trying to get science communication out there and interventions. So more than ever, the anchor in this storm of chaos is going to be the need to take a step back and have that leadership to strengthen and integrate systems, partnerships, and build that trust. So that investment in peacetime is so crucial. Specifically, Mycoplasma bovis, a heap of learnings on that over the last 5 years. If you boil down all the noise, there's probably really three key themes that have consistently come out of the independent review in 2011, the previous reviews done, 2021, and the reviews prior to that. That investment in peacetime is crucial. The largest partnership we've had to have working alongside government in a biosecurity response to date. We have learned a heap in this space, and it paid dividends, particularly in terms of governance level when it came around to COVID. We had that governance buy-in, a group of people that made it so much easier to rapidly activate and actually at a governance level have that buy-in as well. So fantastic upside out of what has been a lot of sacrifice and hard work in the last 5 years. The investment in preparedness is so crucial. Relationships, planning, exercising, people, and I'll chat to that later about some of the work we've been doing in this space. Integrated data systems. I'm going to chat a little bit later about looking to the future. How do we get the system settings match fit to enable what Phil's discussed around having that one biosecurity approach and really being able to look at integration? Until we get data systems and information flows more integrated, we are continually going to be on the back foot. And the crucial importance of lessons are not for the shelf. This was a quote out of Helen Clark when the COVID pandemic lessons were issued. And it's especially important relative to what we've seen out of the last 5 to 10 years of biosecurity incursions within New Zealand. So essential and a real drive from our farmers to see those recommendations out of the independent review applied, and we strengthen the system moving forward. Governance is also crucial. That commitment and support from higher authorities and ensuring that's enduring is going to be really key. There is so much on governors, the country, the economy at the moment, and as we look forward, it is so easy for biosecurity to just become the next thing parked for more urgent business of the day. So having that enduring governance level is going to be key. The huge value in technical expertise, having the right strategic capability has been game-changing in Mycoplasma bovis. The unseen work that goes on behind the scenes of those epidemiologists and other technical experts in the programme, absolute heroes, and the value of regular independent advice to really ensure the decision-making at a governance level is high quality and is able to move fast and pivot as things come your way with biological responses. And then really the crucial importance of communications and engagement, having a really strong comms strategy and recognising the value of getting that right. That has been a key learning out of bovis and other responses, and ensuring that you've got that strategy going to be so key into the future. And then really at the heart of it all, as someone who sat looking after teams in that response for the last 5 years at a personal level and looking at colleagues, it absolutely is all about the people, both in terms of the farmers and the affected people, but also the staff that are working within these high pressure situations for sustained periods. It has high human cost. The social impacts are often underestimated and from a governance level need to be considered from day one. And I'll speak to that later, to some of the biosecurity guidance we've developed for boards as part of the pledge out of that as well. Co-designing communications alongside farmers that resonates. Simply assuming you're going to make an intervention and you've got your communications right will set you up to really have some hard learnings. And really the whole shift of what we're trying to achieve with future biosecurity incursions is to sit down early with the community to co-develop solutions, co-develop communications, and a real drive, and that's only going to get stronger into the future, is there's all this investment going in, significant dollars, but that real need to demonstrate value and outcomes for that investment is becoming an increasing theme. And I'll chat to that later in terms of the future landscape. Thought I'd also briefly touch on some of the other biosecurity incursions, because obviously, although we have immediate pressing commitments in the animal health space, there has been a wealth of learnings recently out of things like Theileria, fall armyworm, yellow briskgrass, blackgrass, what we're seeing in the TB space, velvet leaf, all these other wider learnings that if you really do what Phil's beautifully framed at the start and take a helicopter view, we ultimately have a fragmented, segmented system of delivering biosecurity in New Zealand. We have policy that's 30 years old and the funding settings that have served us well to date, but ultimately are going to need a reform to be match fit into the future. And until we get that sorted, those are fundamentally the system settings to enable future success. So a huge opportunity in the Biosecurity Act review that's coming up to support Stuart Anderson and his team, MPI, to really get those settings match fit for the future. We have biosecurity trying to span what is a really complex supply chain, but the principles, the roles, the building basic blocks of risk management are not fully defined yet in both the policy or an agreed partnership about how we implement that on the ground. Really good opportunities to learn from other systems such as the Food Safety Network that has this in place with really clear roles, responsibilities, and we still ultimately have a heavy reliance on voluntary leavers. That really will only get us so far, and then ultimately you need to think about other incentives and drivers, given the problem that Grant outlined, that we're just seeing more and more of these challenges. So the challenge level and headwinds will not be going away, so we really need to look at system efficiency and also that need to streamline and really show what you're delivering for farmer and taxpayer investments in these big responses. So thinking really tactically about how you can agree priorities where you're going to funnel your investment and show the outcomes for that. So there's governance learnings, and really for us, a large project we've had for some time has been Debrief, which is the Dairy Biosecurity Risk Evaluation Framework. And it's really looking around what are the most likely priority pest, plant and animal diseases, exotic, that could come through, and then thinking about how we apply that into partnerships and agreeing priorities in peacetime. Decision making has also been critical, and really the big learning out of that, really that's been enhanced out of some of the latest incursions we've seen. It's a real challenge that you have to find that balance between applicable research. There is a heavy reliance still on international data, and we don't know ultimately how certain things will behave in the New Zealand context. So the work the likes of Craig Phillips is doing in ag research as well around modelling some of how that might change over time, really important. But also there's this dilemma around response versus management. And as partners, a large part of what we want to achieve out of next year and the year coming is agreeing priorities across the sectors around what are those priorities and what are the suite of tools we need in peacetime, including agrochemicals, having provisional registrations lined up in terms of the ACVM group, vaccine availability. So the tools to respond, there's real opportunity there too, to think tactically about, have we got the suite of options we need to either rapidly respond or move into risk management quickly and efficiently to clamp down and prevent spread around these things. Data systems integration I've talked about before, really in the traceability space, this is a huge priority to farmers. When a lot of your third-party software is delivering multiple things, have you got the system settings right to ensure you're meeting key things like NAIC compliance obligations? And then really innovative new options, the whole GE, GM debate that's at the moment, and that fantastic plant and food research study that's just come out showing public perception there. There's still a lot of gaps in information. So the challenge around communicating science, how soon can some of these innovative and new options be applicable? You chat to Osprey around the pest management challenges they're facing around TB and other things in the moment. And really, how soon can a lot of this research be applicable? You're looking at things like automated traps, network linkages, and with Starlink coming into the picture, does that offer some real opportunities to get into those harder to reach areas? So we have a shifting landscape at the moment. There is a lot of opportunity to be had, but some really fundamental learnings really over the last 10 years. So what are we actually doing about it for dairy farmers and for the dairy industry? So dairy farmers are the largest primary industry in biosecurity under the GIA Government Industry Agreement. As an example, in 2022, 48 million went into the biosecurity system, TB 24 mil, bovis 20 mil, and you think about pest management in terms of delivering improved biodiversity outcomes as well. So there's the synergies and benefits when you take a One Health approach or One Biosecurity. Wider biosecurity initiatives, 1 million, and then Nate, that traceability piece, 3 million. And if you're interested, there is an outline of the work we're doing in our biosecurity report, which we just published recently, and gives you an overview of what farmers are doing. Really serious why for them, matched with serious financial contribution and investment. A lot of detail on this slide, but just wanted to point out that really Dairy NZ and dairy farmers investing is attempting to go right across the biosecurity system. So at a systems level, crucially important, the Biosecurity Act review, we get in and look at that national draft strategy that Stuart Anderson and his team have out at the moment for consultation. Essentially, we have a view and get in there as a complete sector and provide a view and support that strengthening. At a governance level as well, we've been involved at a Bovis of developing through NZ Institute of Directors some biosecurity guidance for boards and chief executives. Suggest you take a look at that. It's some really important information to ensure we have that enduring governance buy-in and they're thinking about biosecurity as well, and that sustainable investment Grant spoke to. Pre-border and border, I've talked about our debrief model, and ultimately it's the right. We've got all these, this research, how are we going to apply it tactically to agree priorities and strategies to enable fast response and management as needed. We've got a huge amount of work post-border in terms of our wonderful partnerships in the GIA space, working across the sectors to look at things like last year. We had a huge focus on FMD, the task force that had been stood up in terms of that readiness. We supported as a small team of 4, 18 out of 28 of those work streams, with a lot of community exercising in regions. Some images here from the partnership regional training that we did, and simulating, exercising alongside MPI, Beef and Lamb, other sector partners that collectively train together, exercise together, and think about the impacts on the ground. Also, a lot of support going into wider responses around communications using our farmer channels and thinking about toolkits there and that farmer guidance and support. Lots around full armyworm, black grass, yellow bristlegrass. But for us, it's really around those partnerships that we've learned out of Bovis, collectively coming together, learning more to train and simulate. And then as an organisation, we have taken a huge focus around our business continuity frameworks at a board level, at a wider organisation level, response training, simulations, and that best practice culture around travel, different guidance. And then farmers, it has to be co-designed. We cannot assume we are just developing and telling them what to do. So there's this whole grassroots movement around that co-design approach, working in community initiatives, so tailored solutions for what actually works for them based on what they're observing and the pain points. So let's look forward. The final question we were asked as part of it, where do I see and the team see the strategy moving into the future? And this image is literally from 2 weeks ago, back home on the family farm in Ireland, spent a bit of time in Ireland, and having spent that outside perspective 2 weeks ago, came back through the border, and really these were the things I was hearing back home and in Europe and with veterinary, with other biosecurity colleagues, with the farming community there. And really, we are seeing some pretty well evolved competitors coming out of COVID, probably 18 months ahead of where we are, and similar themes around the whole regulatory impacts biting when you look at the emissions and pieces that they're dealing with in terms of the large culls they're modelling or proposing. You look at things like resurgence in TB happening back in the UK, that sustainable investment, cumulative stacking, huge social license piece in terms of that need for transparency. Probably the one word I heard the most was value for investment. We cannot keep investing the way we have. There's this transparency, this how are you delivering value, and then the other wider landscape areas such as food security, system insufficiency, inefficiency, the protectionism at a trade level, and seeing Europe moving to the right, thinking about things like that, how that might impact market access and pressure on our systems. So a lot of similar elements there, but really in the gearbox of evolution out of COVID and how did they move forward, really a systems approach was a really strong take home from time there. So the key take homes, kind of want to summarize and just respectful of time, we have a huge opportunity if we take a helicopter view of the landscape to get the system settings right through the Biosecurity Act reform. Some wonderful opportunities there to really look at the building blocks of biosecurity risk management across the supply chain, and are there learnings in the food safety or other space that we can use to get that right and get it well defined. In an area where sustainable investment is facing challenges and we look at the economic outlook, there's that increased focus on value for taxpayers' money, for farmers' dollars. There is real opportunity there to look and think about how we rationalise funding and wider system settings. In the interim, the best we can do is that belts and brace approach to look and review the outcomes and value from and learnings from our responses to date, but then also to look tactically, having agreed priorities across sector partners, and then look at areas we can find coalitions of the willing to basically divert funding and energy. The importance of enduring governance and focus on biosecurity, and the value in governance partners and boards coming together to exercise, to talk about biosecurity collective, a real opportunity in that governance space. So if you're talking to boards and governors trying to get buy-in around your biosecurity programs, I would strongly encourage to check out the IOD guidance that's being developed on the Institute of Directors website. Decision making, it really has to be a pragmatic balance of qualitable, applicable evidence to New Zealand, aspiration, but also this real pragmatism based on the wider system challenges we're facing at the moment. And that innovation research, some phenomenal opportunities, but really that piece around turnaround time and applicability has been a really strong theme. So with that, I'll sign off, and really happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you very much, Liz. And hopefully the rest of the panelists will join me as well. Grant, Liz, Phil, thank you so much. It really sounds like there is a lot of energy and passion to actually approach this as one large integrated issue. What is stopping us? I'll start with Phil, Grant, and then Liz, and then we'll go into the questions that are on the Q&A button. So the people that are actually online, please post questions in your Q&A box, and we will post them to the panel as soon as I see them coming in. So what is stopping us, Phil?
So I guess from a researcher's point of view, I think the New Zealand science system is very sectorial. And so researchers work within particular sectors. And so I've had great collaborations with researchers from ag-research, but they feel very constrained as to what they can work on. And yet they might have the skills that could be applied to horticulture or the natural environment, but their research infrastructure or the basic mission statement of their organization really limits them to work in pasture systems. And similarly, there are great people working in a land care monarchy whenua who could be contributing knowledge to issues that are important to the dairy sector. And so I think that's one aspect, is that we don't necessarily have a very joined up science system. And so I think if we had that, we would be able to address some of these problems much more in an integrated way. And I think the other issue is then we don't have 2 or 3 people in each CRI doing similar things, but not actually talking to each other. So we can actually build a critical mass. I think that would be the first thing we would do. The other aspect is the funding of research, which again, often is very sectorial based and not looking across aspects, and particularly not taking a holistic view. So I think those 2 challenges could be most easily resolved. Hopefully with the new review of the science system, those are changes that could be made that could bring better holistic view of biosecurity.
Thank you very much, Phil. Grant, may I have your view on this?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, I guess there's in terms of why not I guess the last few years have actually brought, you know, I guess there's been the government sort of industry and everyone sort of, I guess, divide. But the last few years with Bovis and other things in terms of putting out preparedness, those sort of collaborations are actually, I think, a lot closer now. So everyone's working a lot closer together. I guess from a Biosecurity New Zealand point of view, there's actually been a lot happening where there's actually been some preparedness stuff, but there's actually also been a lot of response stuff as well. So there's whether you're looking at mycoplasma bovis extending back a few years, or more topically you're looking at fall armyworm has been touched on, or caulerpa, or the golden clam. So there's been a bit of that too. So I guess yeah, it's a busy space. So ideally, a few more people around would actually be helpful to actually, I guess, differentiate between responding and preparing, I guess.
Thank you so much. Liz, may I have your view?
Probably two elements to add into that mix. One is around absolute bandwidth at the moment. It is a challenge in terms of, I talked about those governance settings. And I mean, as a country at the moment, there is so many other burning platforms at the moment. Yes, it's absolutely the role, there's interlinkages and integration there. But I think it's just, it is one of the challenges at the moment. It's that piece that unless you've got a governance mechanism that has biosecurity maintained at that forefront of boards' minds, it will, you know, very rightly succumb to other immediate pressing priorities of the day. That's just life. So there's a piece around really the system settings and having a look at that in terms of, you know, bandwidth and bandwidth at the farmer interface as well, which that was the slide I'd shown. And the other one is the system settings, the opportunities around it to get that match fit, because the practicalities for a farmer, when you look at they're paying 6 different biosecurity levies, soon to be additional, that is quite significant in terms of we've got a system setting that's fragmented. So when you've got these inefficiencies in the system around a lot of ring-fenced funding settings as well that could be opened up more creatively, there's real opportunity in the Biosecurity Act reform and other things to look at the system settings as an enabler as well. So I think there's still some of this more outdated policy that, you know, there's a huge opportunity there to enable and free up some creative thinking and ability to fund some of this wider systems piece.
Thank you so much. So I think there is some work needed in Wellington, if I read between the lines, but it also requires the support of industry and scientists. And so, yeah, I think we all need to put our shoulders underneath it and not assume that we'll be all right, because, like, I think that is, we can't afford that. Question online from Grant Boston. Should GIA be broader and include more than one organization? Liz, I think this could be a question for you.
Should GIA be broader, Grant? I mean, we have seen the real value in the GIA partnership over the last 5 years, really. And I think the key is everybody does see different levels of value and will be coming into partnerships with, I guess, different priorities. So there is the value in the coalition and the willing, the value in doing stuff collectively. But I think the other lens we have is as GIA has evolved, it has gotten a busy space. The more people, you've obviously got a common areas that you will want to work on. But as it gets busier and you do have more parties, there's a pragmatism that does get a busy space. So in terms of, my sense is that there will be discussions around should GIA be broader. Benefits of that is having that wider diversity of thought, the wider ability to engage wider partners in innovation. But then there is obviously that balance as well around when you have a mandate that you've signed up to GIA with a set of priorities that is in the mix with an increasingly wider group. It's how do you balance that? So again, it's those kind of system settings and kind of what Phil has chatted about. It's bringing the different perspectives and community together to at least have a discussion on it and, discuss the merits and how do you really ensure you're getting the system settings right. But absolutely value Phil and Grant's view on this as well.
Phil, Grant? you want to jump in?
Well, I could talk a bit about the GIA. I think that one key area that's outside of GIA is the natural environment. I mean, we're going to face, I suspect that the issue of the interaction between the natural environment, biosecurity risks in our primary sector is underappreciated. We're increasingly viewing the natural environment as a potential for sustainability, for ensuring our products are healthier, using natural enemies, reducing inputs, etc. But when there's an incursion into the natural environment that might cascade onto some of those issues in the primary sector, there's really no one to step up for the natural environment. DOC isn't resourced to do so. And so I think sometimes the natural environment is underappreciated in terms of the value it gives to our primary sector. And when it's threatened, such as things like myrtle rust, there will be cascading effects onto our economy. And so that is an element that is missing out of the GIA. And I think that's something that we need to see who will advocate for the natural environment, but also how the cost sharing approach might be, because a lot of the natural environment is not in public hands, it's also in private hands. So how do we actually protect the natural environment through a GIA mechanism?
And I'd be similar, actually. It's like, where are the gaps and what falls through those gaps? And I mean, just if you're taking a couple of steps back in terms of, I guess, an industry type thing, if you look at lifestyle blocks, using them as an example, they don't necessarily fit under a dairy sort of industry, and they don't fit under a beef industry. So again, they fall through the gaps. So like Phil's mentioned, I think the environment part of which we're seeing from an incursion point of view, that's where those some of the more recent ones are sort of falling into. It doesn't actually have a natural home in terms of any sort of partners in the GIA as it stands.
Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions online being posted in the Q&A part. It seems like we need to have a holistic approach and everybody needs to help. How can we help? Can we do something to actually create that one approach, that horizontal line in those segmented sectors that we have? Phil, can we do a roadshow around New Zealand to make this better altogether? What can we do? Because it seems like what I hear is that it is really important. The risk is definitely out there. We need to be prepared, but at the moment, the bandwidth of the industry is extremely limited. What can we do? So,
I mean, if I had the opportunity to speak, I think that all the presentations were very fascinating, but I was very impressed with how Liz and Derry and Zed are taking things forward. And I think it's a really great template to show an industry that's been under the pump in no uncertain terms, and also one that's constantly in the focus of criticism from the media, is actually responding to these issues, pulling together and bringing in social values, bringing in technology, etc. And I think that a lot of that's driven through grassroots efforts as well. And so I think that's the issue. One of the concerns I have is that perhaps biosecurity is very top down, and yet we don't give enough opportunity for the grassroots, the bottom up approach to dealing with biosecurity. And if we can do that, I mean, the power of the stakeholder is superb, and I think that we don't necessarily give them the voice that's required to deliver this kind of more holistic view, because I think they understand it. You go to a farmer, they understand the holistic view of how they manage their system. They understand all the aspects there, and often I think a lot of the scientists or even policymakers are not so in tune with the situation. So give them a voice, and perhaps let them drive the biosecurity system a bit more than they have done in the past.
Grant, what can we do to help?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the Kātātu, this is us. I mean, it is all of New Zealand. It doesn't necessarily sit with anyone in particular. I guess, different people on the screen have different roles at different places, but it is all of New Zealand needs to be responsible, I guess, in their own little way to biosecurity and be able to influence what they can influence. So yeah, I guess it's that one biosecurity. It is all of us.
Thank you so much, Grant. Liz, what can we do to help?
In a sense, there's an opportunity for an integration pace as well, Wim. As Phil's alluded to, everybody is so busy and there is this bandwidth pace, but there is an opportunity at a systems thinking level. We've obviously had movement around a food strategy, a national food strategy, or the call for it coming through. We've got we've got science strategy elements, and then we've got the draft biosecurity strategy. Great opportunity, which has outlined at a high level what we want to do, but it's now getting into the pointy end of the real rubber hits the road in terms of when you get into an implementation plan and the action plan out of that. So this is a live discussion, and I think there is the opportunity to, at a systems level, have a look at that thinking, because pragmatically there's also the element around funding, as Phil's chatted to, and in wider economic outlook, what's coming down the pipeline in the next 18 to 24 months, there will be constraints. So it's having a think as well from a pragmatic level. Is the stuff that's actually working really well in the food safety space that already has, this is the other thing from a farmer perspective, the more you can integrate with existing systems that they have in terms of biosecurity initiatives you're trying to drive or what you're measuring in terms of value and return. The food safety framework has some real merits there around risk management building blocks that I think it's having a think across different but linked systems. There's that opportunity at that level to bring that systems thinking and leadership together. But as Phil said, listening to our farmers continually, they are often the absolute area which will move the dial in terms of community-based initiatives. So absolutely that grassroots, that co-design approach that we're doing currently in the Ashburton work with Bovis, we think that's a model that could have applicability elsewhere and into the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Phil, Grant, Liz, for your time this morning. And I think we have discussed a really important topic for the future of the whole of New Zealand. Thank you so much for the people online and the people that are watching this as a recording. If you want to help, please reach out and we can link you to the three speakers. Resmi, again, thank you, Phil, Grant, and Liz for being here. And I just want to let you know that if you think that this was useful to you, you might be interested in what we're going to do on the 10th of August, when we have Professor Jim Morton talking about the proteins for life. He will look at the optimization of meat and the potential for meat alternatives. And then on the 18th of August, we'll have we'll look at dairy, the future of dairy in our Living Lab concept here at Lincoln University. So please go to our website, belinkinnovation.com, and click on events, and you will actually see whatever we're doing. Resmi, again, thanking everybody, participants and panelists for today. Thank you so much, and kia ora. See you next time.